A very lovely Saturday afternoon it is, and welcome to the program Shagalinko TV. This is the Saturday's edition. For first timers, Shagalinko comes your way twice a week on Tuesdays and on Saturdays, 2 p.m. West African time, and we're watched across the globe from feedbacks we get. So it's a pleasure having you all here once again. And for those of you that will be joining after today's broadcast, my name is Ambassador Emmanuel Gabari, and I will start first of all by saying thank you to a group of people who have been supporting the show. First of all, let me say thanks to Mr. Ignatius Ibe, who just sent us this. This came in a few days ago, courtesy of Oppo. So they gave Shagalenko an Oppo Reno 5. Thank you so much, Mr. Ignatius Ibe. We really thank you for this. Just set to start off the show by really thanking everyone who's been supporting us. Oppo has always supported us. They gave us earpod the other time, gave us some chargers. And here they are with the new one. They just gave us Renault oh 05. Thank you so much. Thank you. We really appreciate. And yes, across the globe, everyone who's been supporting Shagalinko. I must thank Mr. Chris in London. I also must thank Mr. Pascal Achunene in Lagos. And not forgetting my very good friend, Josiah Okpeyemi Hamza, also from London, who's also been supporting our shows. And lastly, I want to thank Ahmed in London, who's also made sure that every month we have our subscription. And yes, so many of you that are too numerous. If I start calling names now, we may not leave this show today. And thanks to those who also quietly just say, you know what, Ambassador, I want to support you for 1 month, for 3 months, but don't call my name and all that. Like I say, it's fine. We will always respect when you say you don't want us to mention your name. But hey, thank you so much. This is a dream phone for me after iPhone. I've always loved and wanted this phone, and it just came here. It will really ease our work here on Shagalinko. So thank you, everyone. And thanks to everyone who's been watching. We truly must say thank you. Like I say, you have choices every time, but you always find time to join us 2 p.m. West African time on Saturdays and on Sundays all across the globe. I get messages after the show from Asia, from Europe, everywhere. Thank you. Okay, today's episode, for those of you who've seen the flyers a couple of days back, we're looking at the incessant insecurity space. Like joke, is just becoming a norm, from a few bombings up to kidnapping and then to holding hostage, and a whole lot has been happening, And the worrisome part is the new trend where they kidnap students and then ask for ransom, and then they are released and then they go to another school. So we're asking today that how is insecurity affecting the Nigerian economy? Because a lot of times people just think that it's just about insecurity, you not being able to go out, you not being able to do a few things. But we are forgetting that the foreign world is also looking at us. I mean, we say we want investments, we say we want partnership from foreign countries and foreign companies. But who would want to plow money into a country where they know their expatriates, their workers, their citizens would come in and not be safe or even get kidnapped or killed? Who would even want to set up an investment in a country where they know it could get burnt, it could just get modeled up or sealed up at any point in time? The last part I want to mention before I bring in my guests to talk about these issues, the one of food insecurity. Shortly after the flyer came out, I was browsing through the internet and I saw somebody say, how can there be food security when there is insecurity in the land? And that just touched me. And I forwarded the flyer to that group and I said, hey, like you're reading our minds. We're doing this topic today, and would like you to also join us and contribute. So yeah, insecurity also affects agriculture, because you can't tell a farmer to go to the farm when he knows he may not come back that day again. He gets kidnapped or his farm is being, just ravished and all that. Anyway, I have my guest here, Ikemesit Effiong. He's a lawyer. He's a consultant and head of research in SBM Intelligence, Lagos, Nigeria. And together, we'll be trying to find out a few things why there is insecurity and how we can provide solutions to all this. We're streaming live in 3 destinations: on YouTube at Shagalinko TV, on Facebook and Shagalinko TV, and also on my personal page, Ambassador Emmanuel Gabari. Let me bring in Ikemesit, and we'll take up the discussions from there. Hi, Ikemesit. Welcome to the Shagalinko.
Hey, Ambassador. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing, and how is the weather this afternoon in Lagos?
Fantastic. I'm doing great. The weather in Lagos is fair. It's actually been cool, not so hot, not so cold, for the better part of 3 days. I guess, God has answered our prayers. So it's been very friendly. Yeah.
How's it over there? Raining? Is it raining? Because in Kano, it's not raining yet. We're still begging God to bring rains for us.
I mean, it's not only raining in Lagos, it's raining at the best times of the day, right? So, it rains at night and during the day, it's a lot cooler. So, we'll send some your way.
Oh, please do. Thank you so much. So it's good to have you here. And you just saw the release of some of the students, that were kidnapped a couple of days back. It became worrisome even when they started going to secondary schools, and now it's gone to tertiary institutions and all that. So how bad is the insecurity situation in our country? Because sometimes when people talk about insecurity, a lot of angles or group of people just sometimes say we are overblowing the issue. We're just making people get scared and all that. Take me through what you think about the insecurity in Nigeria.
So it's a really, really terrible situation. I think that Nigerians shouldn't underestimate the scale of the problem, because the problem is quite extensive. You have a situation where, and my organization does a lot of work in terms of tracking, reporting around insecurity in Nigeria. We've released a bunch of reports, right, about insecurity, just covering all of the, various facets and dimensions, and, all of the factors and all of the drivers which are, inflaming and are continuing to put a lead on the problem of security, right, in Nigeria. We came out with a graphic just at the tail end of last month that covered, media reported killings in Nigeria. So this is, every media report out there on every flashpoint, every point of, security or any violent incident, right, in Nigeria. And this includes, the insurgency in the northeast against the various Boko Haram factions, the situation with, militia headsmen and pastoral conflicts, abductions, gang clashes, banditry, and, kidnapping incidents that have led to death. And what the numbers show is that at least 2,861 Nigerians, just between January and March alone this year, right, have been killed in all such attacks. And of that number, right, 346 are, are policemen and or security personnel, not just policemen, but also, the military and the other uniformed services. And it's really extensive. You look at the breakdown by geopolitical zone. For our international listeners, Nigeria has 6 of them. So there are 3 in the north, the northwest, the north central, and the northeast. And then you've got the southwest, the southeast, and the colorfully named south, right, in Nigeria's south. So that makes 6 of them. And of those 6, first, every geopolitical zone has a security situation, but to use that well used quotes from Animal Farm, some situations are more equal than others, right? So the northwest is clearly in the lead in terms of how deeply embedded insecurity is, right, in that part of the country. And so you're looking at 957 casualties over the first 3 months of 2020. The Northeast comes in a close second with 936. And then, the further you go south, the North Central, you got 326 incidents. And in the South, only the Southeast, has a casualty figure above 200 with 282. The Northwest and the Southwest and, the South clocking at 175 and 185 respectively. But whichever way you look at it, right, the security situation is really extensive in Nigeria. We look at the numbers and we know that it is significantly escalating. The numbers for the first quarter of last year were at about a little over 1,500. I think it was 1,508. That was the actual number for Q1 2020. And so it's clear that there is a significant escalation of insecurity in this country. It's being driven by a host of factors, but the point is, just from like a broad headline number perspective, it is a significant problem and it's only getting worse.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm also going to ask you this before we even go to some of the basic economic implications that it might have on businesses and investments. What do you think the government and the citizens are not doing? Because I wouldn't just say security issues should be saddled, government should be saddled just with all that. The citizens also have their role to play, especially in community mobilization and communal relationship, with people. So what are the citizens and government not doing right for all this to be happening consistently?
Okay, all right. So I'll sort of take a different approach towards addressing your question. I'll start with the citizens and then, I'll sort of build up to government, because I know that we talk a lot about, government's role and what it should be doing and what it is doing. So I think from the citizens' perspective, historically, we haven't done a good enough job of, keeping our leaders accountable, right? So, just from a sort of a bird's eye view, just sort of, doing things like voting people out of office who haven't appropriately championed or who are in a position to affect security policy and haven't done their job, to really following the issues and, trying to understand what government is really trying to do. I think historically we haven't done a good enough job. I don't think we've done, a good enough job as, as an electorate, right, of, keeping our leaders accountable. We are slowly getting into that paradigm where we are now doing that. And so, Nigerians are becoming more vocal. People are organizing more on social media and offline. You've seen protests across the country and in representations to lawmakers and other elected representatives, right? Especially around the issue of security, you're seeing religious leaders and other community leaders speak up a lot more and become a lot more vocal. And people are putting a lot more pressure, not just, on the executive in Abuja, but also on their state governors to sit up and be proactive in terms of addressing this. And you're slowly seeing that affect the policy-making side of things. Governors in Nigeria Southwest, most famously last year, came together and banded together and decided to form, a regional militia group, which was supposed to ostensibly complement, right, the efforts of the uniformed security, services, right, in trying to achieve a modicum of stability and security. Governors in Nigeria's, Southeast have taken a similar tack, and that's really largely because of that increasing public pressure on our leaders and on the authorities to do a lot more than just making rhetorical platitudes and announcing that they are devoting more financial resources towards improving security in general. People are actually now demanding action, and I think that's sort of a good step in the right direction, but there's obviously more that we can do in that light. On the government side, the picture is a lot more nuanced. So first, not just our constitution, but according to Nigeria's constitution, as well as if you study, government or political science, politics, right, in secondary school or in university, right, you were taught that the fundamental job of government is to guarantee, the lives, right, and the properties of its people, of its citizens. And fundamentally, if the government is failing in meeting that core significant responsibility, that is ab initio failed, right, in its fundamental role as government. And it's, if not completely loses, but it's definitely on that slippery slope towards losing its legitimacy as a governing authority. And Nigeria's government hasn't done that. I mean, for a host of reasons, which I suppose we'll get into, right, later in our conversation. But the part I really want to highlight now is that government hasn't been a honest broker in trying to address the multiplicity of issues, right, that Nigeria, right, is dealing with. Nigeria clearly has a security issue, but that security issue is rooted in decades of failed economics, in decades of failed attempts at really fostering equitable political representation, right? So a lot of disaffected groups in this country feel like, they are off Nigeria, but they are not in Nigeria. They aren't participating, right, in the day-to-day decision making that defines us, right, as a country. They're fundamentally disenfranchised. And you look at the origins of Boko Haram, a lot of the gang movements in Nigeria, a lot of the gang movements, the militant movements in the Niger Delta, the low-key separatist movement you'll find in the Southeast, even the pastoral conflict between herdsmen and settler farming communities. And it's really a fundamental issue of legitimacy and a lack of political and economic participation. Because if a serious government would have found ways to integrate, potentially disaffected groups into, the economic and social and political fabric and framework of the country. But you've got successive generations of Nigerian administrations that have simply not cared. They've simply not cared about, whether, Nigerians are properly represented, their voices are being heard, their concerns are being addressed, or their economic livelihoods are being attended to. And people, have chosen to react in often deviant and violent and destructive ways. And we're basically sowing we're basically sowing the fruits of, what we have cultivated for decades and decades on end. And, you can isolate any number of Nigerian security issues and try to do a historical look back, and you would find, that a lot of those problems are rooted in, in social and economic contradictions that have been going on for years, and in some cases decades. Whether it's a lack of economic opportunities, poor access to education, poor access to social services, and all of that. There are many parts of Nigeria you go to, and this because you travel pretty often, where for miles and miles, right, of territory, that there's really no presence of the Nigerian state at all. There's no police station, there's no court, there isn't, a social facility like, say, hospital or a health center or, or a communal place where people can even go to get things like water, right? The best you might find is, say, a market and farms, right? And so, there are many Nigerians in our country that are used to fending for themselves. And when it's become prohibitively expensive or nigh on impossible because of, the wider economic issues that we're dealing with, for them to do so, they resort to crime, right, and violence. And Nigeria's history is replete with examples of people being rewarded for picking up guns and becoming violent. And so, for people, it's a very ready avenue to get themselves heard and also to provide for their families. And that has led us into this situation that, we largely find ourselves in.
Okay, thank you. I'll read a few messages here, and then I'll come back to ask you some more questions. This one says, this one is from author Peter Side. It says, the fear of the unknown. People now are not trusting their neighbors. Tips on how you move is being sent to kidnappers. Sleeping with one eye has been the order of the day. No more going out without letting one know about your whereabouts. It's so dreadful each day. What do you have to say about this? Thanks, author, by the way.
Yeah, author is right. I think for for the generations of Nigerians that largely precede the internet age or social media. So, you and I didn't grow up with cell phones. Cell phones were an acquired habit, probably, at the end of secondary school or university. But, from our generations backwards, right? Let's not add, Gen Z or Gen Y to this. Most of us grew up in a multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic paradigm. We had neighbors who, weren't from the same ethnic group as we were. We went to schools, that were populated by people who weren't largely from, the same parts of Nigeria, right, that we were in. And, we played together, in the same neighborhoods. We went to the same churches or mosques, and, for us, it was a given that, that Nigeria is this multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious place, and you just have to get on with it, and and make friends and build connections. However, and that's still largely the case in large parts of Nigeria. But I think what has happened, which has led to the issue, which author is highlighting, is that on a political level, the conversation has become much more polarized, right? And so you've got people who are much more willing, not just to emphasize their otherness or their difference in terms of, where they come from, what language they speak, what, God they worship, or what religious creed they pay, adherence to, but they're also much more willing to demonize the other, right? So for these other people from this other part of the country who worship God differently, who eat differently, who dress differently, who love, and live differently and play differently, are fundamentally deviant and evil and dangerous and subversive. And I think that's dangerous in a multicultural setting like Nigeria, because we can't make Nigeria work without finding a way to coexist peacefully and profitably. And we now have leaders who pay fidelity to our basest and our worst elements, and are more willing to amplify that for their own political gains. And so many Nigerians do not understand that the actual political imperative lies in us being together, if not loving each other. No one says, we should necessarily be best buddies, but finding a way of reaching political and social and economic accommodation, because we can't do without each other, because we live under one umbrella and under one roof. Some people have gone as far as, getting comfortable and floating the idea of secession and separation. But, for someone like me who watches and tries to understand Nigeria for a living, and looks at things from a geopolitical lens, when you just look at the geography and the geopolitics of Nigeria, secession doesn't still address the issue. So let's think of a hypothetical situation where the South and the North split. The North is still largely responsible for producing the majority of Nigeria's food, right? And especially, commodities that have become, staples: rice, wheat, millets, sorghum, basically almost the vast majority of our cereals come from the North, right? And you can extend that to vegetables and fruits like, tomatoes and bananas and apples, and all of that. That imperative is not going to disappear because there's going to be, a new international border that, follows the outline, say, of the rivers Niger and Benue. For example, the South hosts the bulk of Nigeria's manufacturing and industrial capacity, right? The imperative of having, and plus Nigeria owns, Southern Nigeria owns all of Nigeria's coastline, right? So for a North, for example, that wants to take its goods to the outside world, you will still need all the ports of Southern Nigeria in order to get business done. You will still need Southern Nigeria's industrial and manufacturing, right, and economic capacity to drive things like investment, right? In the North, that imperative is not going to disappear because an international border is created. So whichever way you look at it, whether together as one country or split together as, 2, 3, several, whichever number, of countries, right, you can divide this country into. The geopolitical imperative of how we have constructed our lives, basically, economically since the 1700s, right? Because there's evidence, right, that trade between places like Kano, where you're in, and the old Benin, right, empire, right, and the early Yoruba, and certainly the northern Igbo states and communities, right, goes back to the 1700s. Certainly since 1914 and amalgamation, all of those imperatives are not going to disappear. We will need to create, right, new avenues of economic and social contradiction. And like I always like to say, there is no breakup in the history of the world that's ever been peaceful, that's ever not been coercive, and hasn't led to violence and bloodshed. So if that is going to be the solution to our present epidemic of insecurity and bloodshed, then I don't see how more violence and bloodshed and insecurity solves that problem. So it's a much more complicated picture than that. And I think more Nigerians need to get educated about these issues for us to then recognize when our political leaders are baiting us and using, very basic elements of ethnicity and religion to try to divide us.
Thank you very much. So I'd also like everyone watching to just share and drop comments on the comment section there or on the other line, and we'll be reading them. But let me take this one quickly. This one says, my name is Johnson and I'm watching from Tanzania. I'd like your guests to let us know also why it is that in Africa, religion and culture is also fueling insecurity.
Oh, wow. Johnson from Tanzania, that's a great question. As a matter of fact, my organization, we're in the final stages of tidying up a report on terrorism and jihadist influences right across Africa, right? And this is a continent-wide issue. I know that for most people who follow international headlines, you're used to seeing headlines of terrorism and jihadist insurgency, coming from largely from north and west and more central and eastern portions of Africa, but even southern Africa, right, has an insurgency issue, as you're seeing with the recent developments coming out of northern Mozambique, right, and Palma, and just how a jihadist insurgency that has paid allegiance to Al-Shabaab and ISIS, right, is just wreaking havoc in that part of the country. Why is that the case? I think the problem is historical. I think first we are coming from a political and a social paradigm of centuries of economic and political and social domination. First by Arabs in large parts of coastal east, and southern portions of Africa, and certainly by the Europeans for sort of like the rest of Africa, western, central, and southern portions of it. And this was the tool that the Europeans used fairly efficiently, first to proselytize and convert a lot of Africans, to Christianity, but also, Arabic and more Middle Eastern portions of Africa using Islam also, as that tool, and then using those blocks and buckets of religion to sort of define what national or cultural identity, suited European political, European political interest. What we haven't done well as a continent is we simply inherited those buckets upon independence, largely in the late 50s and early 60s for most portions of Africa, and we have remained with them. And I think that's where, understanding your history, understanding the paradigm and the context within which, contemporary developments sit in actually helps, because this is not to say that, conflicts around identity haven't existed in Africa. They clearly had, in pre-colonial times, but what colonialism and sort of the post-colonial environments that we're in, did to Africa was that it solidified those impulses, and it made those impulses the dominant frame within which we do our politics, we organize our economics, we educate our kids, we we interact with the outside world economically, and it's not a healthy paradigm, because say what you want to say about the Europeans and to a lesser extent the Americans, they are willing to put aside their cultural and religious and social pretensions when it comes to doing business or engaging with the world. And that's something that I think Africa needs to learn, and learn better. And again, it's just sort of supersizing that Nigerian experience, right, of demonizing the other and not doing the hard work and investing in negotiation and in more conciliatory forms of politics, right? That's very much an African phenomenon, right? Right now, you see a situation, for example, let's just take an example in Europe, Belgium, for example. Belgium hasn't had, I would say Belgium hasn't had a functioning government since 2015, but Belgium has gone through, I think, 6 or 7 cycles of coalition governments, right, since 2015 alone. But that small European country finds a way to make itself function, right, even when it's going through periods of what you would generally typify, right, as political instability. That can happen in any African country I know of right now. Maybe South Africa, right? But even the picture, right, in South Africa, right, is changing, right? But it's certainly in the vast majority of countries in Africa, that's certainly not possible. I mean, most African countries, currently have a political paradigm where there is a dominant political force, right, and significant opposition blocks, and that dominant political force basically invests all of its energy not in funding education or building infrastructure or generally developing its economy, but in keeping the political opposition sufficiently weak enough that it is able to guarantee its own hold on power. And that's a very basic, and when you go back and you look at colonial history, a very colonial way of doing things, because that's what the British and the French and the Belgians and the Spanish and the Portuguese did, right, in a lot of their African colonial holdings, where they essentially divided and conquer, right? They set up Hutu against Tutsi, Hausas against, Southern Nigerians, Yorubas and Igbos, Ashanti against Fanti. And, history is replete with that, right? And, Africa is still paying, right, the price for that, because, like I said earlier, we took those models, adopted them whole line and sinker when we became independent, and we haven't let go of them. And that's not how you can't run a successful political democratic country in the 21st century if you behave like that. I mean, say what you want to say about the United States, for example. The Democrats and the Republicans, basically injuring and insulting themselves at every point and turn. When it comes to the big issues, they find a way to negotiate and unite and get things done. And that's what we really need to learn, right? As a continent, right, as a whole, right? Right now in 2021 and, looking beyond.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll be going on now to look at what the implications are for our economy. But let me just quickly appreciate those who are also watching us, and those who just dropped a few signs to let us know. This is thanking Nina Ricci, all the way from the United States of America. She just buzzed us now to say she's watching. Beatrice Anand from Accra, Ghana. Thank you so much. It's good to know. She's always a regular. Every time we come here on the show, she's always dropping comments. I'm wondering why her comments didn't come today. She dropped on Tuesday. Well, Beatrice, it's good to know you're watching. And also to Pascal Achunune, all the way from Lagos. Thank you. Jidesi Aligbe in Kano. Karim J. A. Jackson from Philippine Islands in Asia is also watching. Thank you. And Arthur Peterside from Jos dropped his comment already before, and we read it on the show. So thank you all for watching. Keep your comments on the session here or on the other phone, and we'll read it. And I'll be back here now to Ikemesit. Let's talk about the implications. I know you also talked briefly about it when you were talking, but basically, I am worried on like 2-3 sectors, like the educational sector. I watched the interview of one of the the mothers of one of the students they just released, and they were asking her if she would let her daughter go back to school. And that really broke my heart because she said she's not sure she would let her daughter go back to school because she's not sure if the school will provide security. But if they provide security, she might let her daughter go. And I know that speaks for a lot of other parents. They rather say, I'd rather have an illiterate child stay with me at home and be alive than in the quest for education send him or her to school and then risk them being kidnapped and all that. So, in your opinion, what are the economic implications, whether for business, investors? Or recently, we also heard of the Twitter thing that sought romance with Ghana. Hyundai is there. So many other organizations.
You opened an office in Ghana.
Yeah. So
It's hardly romantic.
so many foreign investors are really seeking romance with Ghana. It's not like it's not for our good. We appreciate, but what we're just saying in essence is hitherto Nigeria would have been the preferred place based on our number, our economy, our development, and all that. So going to Ghana just shows that it could be peaceful. They've done their I mean, no business person will want to go to a place they know that they want to recoup. Aside just that, everyone is looking for peace. We've also said here constantly for activists, we've also said if government can just fix power, electricity, not even 100%, we're just looking at 70%, 50%, it will solve a whole lot of self-employment. Young people will go into tech, opening of business centers, doing laundry, barbing salon. So much will happen. But hey, maybe we're just crying. So what's your view about all this whole thing?
You're absolutely right, right? Security is a big consideration for investors everywhere, and especially more so in Africa, where the business environment isn't as developed, it's developing, and actually lots of investors are just illiterate on Africa and are seeking a better understanding. And really, right, when you go to just think about it, especially if you've ever had to travel outside the country, right? Would you willfully pack your bags, right, and go to a place where there is a likelihood of you not coming back home? I don't think anyone will sign up for that. So insecurity, yeah, does cost us in that sense. I know, my organization, for example, does a lot of route to market studies, right, for clients, especially international clients who are looking to enter the Nigerian market. And one of the big things they tell us before we even, get to educate them on sort of the nuances, right, of the Nigerian market is, how do we tackle security? How do we answer the $64,000 question around security in Nigeria? Because even in our urban centers, especially urban centers in the south, where you think, oh, most of the problems are in the north or in the northeast or in central Nigeria, thereabouts. Lagos, where I'm in, has a low-level kidnapping problem. So it's so it is a concern. I mean, it's like the UK High Commission, the US Embassy issued advisories 2 weeks ago encouraging their staffers in Lagos. Now, Lagos is the biggest population center on the continent. It's Africa's fifth largest economy if it was a standalone country in and of itself. It's Nigeria's and West Africa's economic commercial center. You really don't have a West African strategy if you aren't represented in Lagos in some shape or form. But even within Lagos, right, people are advising their employees to be careful when they go out, not to stay out too late, not to move around unaccompanied. And that's just once a business that feels that it doesn't have a choice but to be in Nigeria gets to the point of advising, advising their staffers to behave that way, then you really have a situation, right? I have a lot of interactions with members of the diplomatic community, and I'll tell you this, right? Lagos is a combination of, islands, peninsulas, and also has a mainland portion. I stay in the mainland part of Lagos, right? And, a lot of the diplomatic missions, in fact, all the diplomatic missions that I know of, I think practically all of them, right, are sort of like on the island side of it, because, that's the cushier part of town. And if I'm setting up a meeting with any given member of the diplomatic community, or even journalists, for example, foreign journalists, for example, just sit down, hang out, have lunch, talk about Nigeria, most of them would not come to the mainland. I mean, it's that intractable. Like, for most of them, their only journey to the mainland is to go to the airport, because the airport is on the mainland, and then they are on to Abuja or abroad or wherever it is they're going to. So it really is, a very tough situation in terms of, foreign direct investment that is willing to take the risk on the Nigerian market, and all of the other economic issues around the purchasing power of the average Nigerian, infrastructure and all of. I mean, without security, Nigeria's issues are still pretty significant. But when you have an investor that's willing to look past all of that, security then becomes the one non-negotiable, right? And if push gets to shove, there are much more saner markets not far from Nigeria where you can invest. You can set up shop in Abidjan, you can set up shop in Lomé, you can set up shop in Accra, as a lot of people, a lot of investors who have an eye for the Nigerian market. Let's take note of that, right? Are increasingly willing to. And Nigeria is in ECOWAS, which is this West African regional, economic and social body, more like the EU. There is a freedom of goods and movements and services across, ECOWAS, much like you'll find in the Schengen area, right, in the EU or in ASEAN, right, in Southeast Asia. And so I can set up shop in Banjul, right, or in Accra, or in Freetown, or in Monrovia, or in any of the other English-speaking capitals, and I'm 4 or 5 hours away from Lagos, right, by air, and I'm able to serve the Nigerian market. So, a lot of investors are now, to borrow a word from the tech community, they're now hacking Nigeria by, setting up in other West African countries and, and trying to serve the Nigerian market. And I think it does a great disincentive to us, because, the human capital investment component, right, of foreign direct investment in terms of employing Nigerians and training Nigerians and giving Nigerians exposure to, international best practices across a range of industries, that gets lost. And that's a key component in driving economic development. That's how China and much of the East Asian tigers actually got up the ladder, by getting that exposure to, Western patterns of production and Western patterns of economic participation and economic organization. And Nigeria, to a lesser extent, and to a much greater extent, Africa needs that exposure. That's where FDI is important. I know we talk about FDI a lot in terms of employment, and that's a huge thing, but in terms of exposure, because you're going to have people who spend 5, 10, 15 years, working for an international multinational or for a foreign company that's based in say, an African country, say Tanzania or Kenya or Nigeria, who then leaves and goes starts his own company and employs his own countrymen and builds up an entire ecosystem, or uses local knowledge to better serve his countrymen. And that's how economic productivity, that's how economic value is created. A lot of the unicorns that you see come out of Nigeria, you see come out of Southern Africa, you see come out of, portions of, East and North Africa, that's really the pipeline. And so, shutting ourselves out of, tapping into that international marketplace of ideas, of, productivity, of activity, that's where we really, really lose it, right? And, you make a good point also about education, right? Nigeria still is playing catch up in terms of the quality of instruction, right? And just in terms of how we learn, and we educate our kids generally here. And we've had this, national conversation, and this might not be very apparent to non-Nigerians, but we've had this conversation in Nigeria about not having enough schools and not having enough universities, but we churn out almost 1 million graduates a year. And the government has been pushing this private university, drive to ramp up the number of, institutions of higher learning that we have in Nigeria. And those institutions are now being targeted, by armed gangs and, and by bandits and kidnapping rings. So it doesn't say a lot. About 7 northern states in February alone closed about 500 schools. Right, primary and secondary schools. And that's a huge number, especially in a part of the country where, access to educational opportunities is already constrained as is. It really, insecurity really, really does cost you, because when you're playing catch up, you need all the advantages you can get. And insecurity closes the door of opportunity to the people who live in the places where, these things are affected. When it comes to security, everybody just retreats back to, that animal flight first reaction where we're just trying to be alive because, like we say in Nigeria, right? And, pardon me from switching from Queen's English to Nigerian Pidgin English. Now only person where they are alive fit go to school. So basically, only a person who is alive is able to get an education. So it really is, or get a job, or start a family, or start a business. So the ripple effects of not fixing security. And I should say this, and I'll probably just wrap up my thoughts on that particular question is a lot of the insecurity that's going on in Nigeria, right, especially, the kidnapping, the banditry, and the insurgency are affecting Nigeria's primary food growing regions, right? So what that means is a lot of Nigerians who are involved in agriculture can't go to the farm, can't harvest, can't plant, can't tend to their crops, right? And it affects Nigeria's food security. Nigeria is already, I think, in the top 10 globally in terms of, having, the highest level of food risk in the world. When you combine this security situation with the fact that much of Nigerian agriculture is rain-fed, and so it's reliant on the vagaries of the weather. And, we have weather advisories that come out every year that, consistently say that a majority of Nigeria's food-growing regions are also a flood risk. The ripple effects in terms of, not just the amount and the kind of food that you can find in the market, but also at what price point you can find it becomes really serious. Last year, towards the end of last year, September, October, November last year, Nigeria went through an onion shortage. Earlier in the year, it was for tomatoes, but towards the end of the year, it was for onions because a lot of the tomato and onion growing regions were buffeted by floods, by insecurity, and, by, again, just that chronic underinvestment in Nigerian agriculture, which has been a staple, for decades on end. So when you look at every possible social and economic jigsaw puzzle where insecurity is a feeder point, the ripple effects and the consequences are often very, very significant and very, very harmful, for the country, but also, for Nigerians on an everyday level.
Okay, thank you very much. I am happy you remembered the part of the agriculture because when you were reeling out some of the economic implications, I just noted that I was going to still ask you about agriculture because a whole lot of farmers are even scared of going to their farms anymore. Even when they want to go, they just find that headsmen have gone into, just do a whole lot with that. So it's a good thing you remembered that to wrap up that with. We're running out of time now, and I know I might have to bring you again to really talk because there are so many things I really wanted you to talk about, especially to also let us know about what SBM Intelligence been doing. But briefly, as we wrap up now, maybe that will be your final word. In a minute or two, just let us know what you guys do in SBM Intelligence, and then you let us know your final words to everyone watching.
Okay, great. So SBM Intelligence is a geopolitical risk consulting firm. We're based out of Lagos, but we have offices right across West and Central Africa. And what we basically do is we provide geopolitical intelligence as well as market intelligence, right, for our clients. But we also do a lot of geopolitical reporting on the Nigerian and West African situation. So we've done reports covering our economy, covering agriculture, covering security. We're very well known for, the depth of our security analysis, not just about Nigeria, but also about West and Central Africa. We're widely, reported on and quoted in, Nigerian and African and international media as a trustworthy source of analysis on, things like the pastoral conflict, for example. We did our first report on the pastoral conflict, basically the clashes between herdsmen and farmers. Our first report was in 2016, and we said this was going to be a significant, problem if the government didn't address it. We're in 2020, 2021, and that became an issue. We did an interesting report, which I think I'd like everyone to check out because it's become more relevant as the problem of kidnapping in Nigeria has become more severe, and which is we did a report last year on the economics of kidnapping. So we put a number, as to how much Nigerians have paid in terms of ransoms over the past 10 years leading up to July 2020, and that was about $18.1 million for the numbers we could find. And we stated in our report that it was clearly an underestimate, probably by a factor of 2 or 3. And we also talked about sort of what the drivers, right, of kidnapping were. If kidnapping was a legitimate industry, there are only 4 Nigerian economic sectors that would outrank it in terms of its economic value, right? To unfortunately, these criminals and kidnappers. So we do, interesting work in that space. We watch West Africa closely. We did a lot of analysis and research into understanding where Africa would go, say, after the death of, Idris Deby, the recently deceased Chadian president. And so, that's work that, we generally do. We are a Google search away. And, we're also on all social media platforms. So you can follow us. And if you have a specific business or research need, you could always shoot us an email or reach out to us on social media. In terms of my parting words, we can get the security question right. It will take a lot of political will on the part of the Nigerian authorities. It will also take a fair amount, because this situation has become so big and has become almost intractable, that we'll also need some form of regional and international cooperation, because we basically exported quite a number of quite a number of the insurgency and the jihadist influences that you're seeing floating around Western Central Africa now. And it would also take everyday Nigerians, Nigerian citizens, Nigerian voters keeping their their elected representatives, both at the federal and sort of at the state and local level, on their toes in terms of demanding accountability. Finally, the security problem is also deeply embedded to the economic situation in Nigeria, and I can't see a situation where the security situation improves significantly if the economic prospects of a majority of Nigerians also turn for the better. So watching the economics where we go, especially inflation and food inflation, right, is super important. So those will sort of be my parting thoughts. And as always, thank you so much for having me on your fantastic and really good and very relevant and enlightening program as well. It was a pleasure sharing a bit of my Saturday with you and with everyone who has tuned in from every part of the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And yes, I also would like to thank all our viewers. I've been getting inbox messages saying that they've been trying to send messages online, but I don't know what's happening today with the network. But then the videos will be here after, so you can still find the full videos on YouTube and on Facebook, Shagalinko TV. So keep your comments going on there. Hopefully we shall bring Ikemesit back to talk about some other angles and a few more questions that I couldn't really ask for lack of time, because we need to wrap up shortly. So once again, I want to thank everyone who joined us, everyone who watched, even though some were finding it hard to drop their comments. But you know what? As soon as the network lets you drop your comments, please do drop them there, because we'll also review them and give to our guests to gather them. And maybe when it comes next time for a part 2 of the discussions, he could respond to some of them. Or better still, when we take entirely a different topic, he might just start off with some of those comments. So thank you all for watching, everyone, Beatrice, everyone, yeah, from all across, thank you so much, and keep your comments coming. And please remember to like our YouTube page, subscribe to our YouTube page. In fact, all our social media handles is at Shagalinko TV, but particularly, let's also grow our YouTube page. Like it, and also click on the notification button so it alerts you when we go on air. Thanks to everyone who's been liking our page. We are 7,000 plus right now, and so we could hit 10K. So try and make that a reality. So keep your likes, do share the page to everyone. We really thank our Facebook fans. They are so fanatic, so to say. Yeah. So thank you all. And once again, I will reel out all my greetings. Yes, to Oppo once again and Mr. Ignatius for giving me this brand new just to make our show here very wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Ignatius eBay of Oppo. And yes, to Mr. Chris all the way from London. Thanks for all the assistance. To Mr. Pascal Achunine in Lagos. Josiah Opayemi Hamza in London, and also Ahmed in London. Yes, everyone who's always supported us in one way or the other. There's a lady called Rosaline in Abuja. We traveled together to Senegal, right? Yeah, so she's always calling herself Shagaliku influencer. I'm sure she'll be watching right now. She'll be waiting like, Ambassador, you greeted everybody. You didn't greet me back. We'll wear one trouser together. So, Rosemary, if you're watching right now, thank you so much. You always call yourself Shagalenko influencer. Thanks, everyone. And yes, till we come again on Tuesday for a fresh edition of the show, we'll be looking at a few things from the Niger Delta on Tuesday. So I'll be having Jetta, I'll be having Steve, and another guy from Niger Delta. We'll be looking at some issues that are surrounding the Niger Delta as it affects climate change. Okay. All right. Thank you once again, and hoping you have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. Enjoy yourselves and make sure you stay safe. Remember, COVID-19 is real. Do stay safe. Wash your hands regularly. Wear a nose mask if you must step out of your vicinity. And then always sanitize your hands as you move along. My name is Ambassador Emmanuel Gabari. Thank you once again, our guest, Barrister Ikemesit Effiong. He's consultant and head of research, SBM Intelligence, Lagos, Nigeria, and also a legal practitioner. I hope you all enjoyed the show. Let's meet up again, God willing, on Tuesday for a fresh edition. God bless you all and have a beautiful, beautiful time. Bye.